It was a sunny Wednesday morning in Atlanta, Georgia, when Danielle Roberts walked into a small branch of Commonwealth National Bank. She wore a fitted black blazer, cream blouse, and a pair of dark jeans with comfortable flats. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun, and her steps were calm and steady. She looked like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. And she did. She had parked her car just 10 minutes ago. The bank was not far from where she lived, and she liked to get things done early in the day. Danielle had work to return to, though it didn't look like it from the outside. Most people never guessed what she really did for a living. She didn't talk about it much, not because she was secretive, but because her work was complicated, and also, in a way, confidential. Danielle stood in line behind a young man depositing cash and an older woman arguing about overdraft fees. She was holding a certified check in her hand, sealed inside a thin white envelope. The amount was large, $425,000 to be exact. It wasn't a lottery win. It wasn't an inheritance. It was her final project bonus, part of a federal contract she had just completed for a cybersecurity initiative. It had taken her months of intense, behind-the-scenes work, solving problems that could have affected entire cities. But nobody at the bank knew that. When it was finally her turn, she stepped up to the teller, a young woman in her 20s with neatly pressed hair and a name tag that said Monica. Danielle smiled and politely slid the envelope forward. "I'd like to deposit this into my account," she said. Monica opened the envelope, glanced at the check, and froze for just a second. She read the amount again. Her eyes narrowed slightly. $425,000, she said aloud, glancing at Danielle, then back at the check. "One moment, please." Danielle nodded. She had expected the amount might cause a little delay. That wasn't unusual. Large checks always triggered extra steps. But Monica didn't. "Just walk to the back with the check." She walked straight to her manager's office, still holding it in her hand. Danielle stood at the counter waiting patiently. She checked her phone, answered 2 emails, and tapped her heel softly on the right tiled floor. Minutes passed. Then she noticed Monica and the branch manager, a tall man with a slick haircut and a sharp suit, staring at her from behind the glass door of his office. The manager stepped out, walking directly toward her. He wore a tight smile, the kind that pretends to be friendly but doesn't quite reach the eyes. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Mr. Connors, the branch manager. Do you mind stepping over here with me for a moment?" Danielle blinked, a bit surprised, but stayed calm. "Sure," she said, following him to a side area with a small desk and 2 chairs. She sat down. Mr. Connors sat across from her and folded his hands on the desk. "I just wanted to ask you a few questions about this check," he said. "Can you tell me where it came from?" "Yes," she replied smoothly. "It's a project completion bonus from a federal cybersecurity contract I completed last month. The company is listed there. I have ID and any documentation you might need." She opened her purse, handed over her driver's license, and even produced a printed copy of the award letter. It had an official-looking header and signatures from the company. Mr. Connors took the papers but didn't even glance at them long. Instead, he raised an eyebrow. "I see," he said. "And what do you do for this company exactly?" "I'm a cybersecurity consultant," she answered. "I build and test systems to protect digital infrastructure. Banks, government networks, airports, that kind of thing." He gave a quick, doubtful laugh. "Really?" Danielle's face remained neutral. She had heard that tone before, at restaurants, stores, even airports. It was the sound of someone seeing her skin before her skills. "Yes," she said again. "That check is for services I provided. I've worked with several federal agencies over the last 10 years. Mr. Connors stared at her for a long second. "Right. I'll be back." He walked away again, and this time Danielle could feel something had shifted. A bad feeling started to grow in her chest. She looked around. The room felt colder somehow. Monica wouldn't meet her eyes when she returned to the counter. 10 more minutes passed. Suddenly, a man in a dark blue suit and a woman in uniform walked into the bank. They were police officers. Danielle sat up straight as they approached. One of them asked, "Danielle Roberts?" "Yes," she said slowly. "Please stand up," the man said. "We've received a report of suspected forgery. We need to ask you some questions down at the station." Danielle blinked. "Forgery?" she asked. "That check is real, I just explained." "We're not saying anything for certain," the officer cut in, his voice smooth but firm. "But we need you to come with us." He took out a pair of handcuffs. Danielle took a step back. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said. The officer moved forward. "Ma'am, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." People in the bank were starting to stare. A man with a phone in his hand was already recording. Danielle didn't argue. She raised her hands and allowed them to cuff her. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. But her face was tight with disbelief. She was being arrested for trying to deposit money she had earned. As they led her out of the bank, customers whispered. One woman muttered, "What did she do?" Another person said, "Told you that check was fake." Danielle kept her head up. She sat in the back of the police cruiser as they drove her to the local precinct. They didn't say much. She could feel their eyes on her in the rearview mirror, measuring her, judging her. When they arrived, they led her into a holding room. Plain walls, no windows, metal bench. They took her fingerprints, her phone, her purse. One officer asked again, "How did you get the check?" She gave the same answer. "It's from my work. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. That was a final payment for a federal-level job I completed." They nodded, but didn't believe her. You could see it in their eyes. Meanwhile, back at the bank, Mr. Connors had already contacted the corporate fraud department. He forwarded copies of the check and Danielle's ID. The bank had flagged the transaction as suspicious due to inconsistent client profile. In other words, a black woman depositing nearly $500,000 didn't fit their idea of what was normal. The irony was, Danielle had been banking with them for years. She'd never bounced a check, never missed a payment. Her credit score was nearly perfect, but no one checked those details. All they saw was a big number and a brown face. In the holding room, Danielle sat alone. She had no phone, no watch. Time crawled. Her thoughts were heavy, but she refused to let herself fall apart. She'd worked too hard. She'd built a career most people couldn't even understand. And now she was being treated like a criminal. About 2 hours later, the door opened, but it wasn't the same officers. 2 men in dark suits entered, wearing badges clipped to their belts. They didn't look angry. They didn't look suspicious. They looked respectful. "Ms. Roberts?" One of them said. Danielle looked up, confused. "Yes?" The taller man stepped forward. "We're with the FBI. We just want to speak with you for a moment." Her breath caught. Not because she was afraid, she wasn't, but because she had not expected them. They sat down across from her. The shorter agent opened a file. The taller one said, "We were notified about a flagged federal transaction. We just came from the issuing company." Danielle blinked. "And?" The agent gave a small smile. "That check is real. In fact, we came here to thank you." Silence. Danielle frowned. "Excuse me?" "You helped us prevent a major cyber attack during that project," the shorter agent said. "We're not allowed to disclose too much detail, but let's just say your work didn't go unnoticed." Danielle was speechless. From being handcuffed in a bank lobby to being thanked by the FBI, all in one day. "We're sorry this happened," the taller one said. "You should not have been treated this way." Outside the room, the local officers were confused. Why was the FBI here? Why were they being so respectful to a woman they had arrested for forgery? But the truth was simple. Danielle Roberts wasn't just any citizen. She was a brilliant cybersecurity specialist who had done more to protect the country than any of them realized. The agents stood. "We'll make sure this gets sorted," one said. "And if you ever need us again, you know how to reach us." They shook her hand. It was the first respectful gesture anyone had shown her all day. Danielle left the police station 2 hours later. No charges, no record. Her check? Already verified. Her dignity? Still intact, but shaken. She didn't speak to the bank again that day. But what they didn't know was that everything they had done, every doubt, every insult, every decision to see her as suspicious instead of successful, was about to blow up in the public eye. But that came later. For now, Danielle sat quietly, in her car, staring out the windshield. She wasn't angry. Not yet. But she was tired. Tired of always having to prove herself. Tired of being judged by what people assumed instead of what she had achieved. Still, deep down, she knew one thing. The truth always comes out, and hers was just beginning. After Danielle was taken to the police station, the atmosphere changed completely. The bright sunlight of the morning was replaced by the cold fluorescent lights of the interrogation room. The walls were bare, painted a dull gray, and the air smelled of disinfectant and nervous tension. Danielle sat on a hard metal chair, her hands folded in her lap. Across from her, 2 police officers stared at her, their faces unreadable, their eyes sharp and calculating. The officers had questions, many questions, but none of them seemed to want to listen to her answers. "Where did you get that check?" "Ms. Roberts?" one officer asked, his voice low and steady. Danielle took a deep breath. She had practiced this moment in her head, but the reality felt harsher. "It's from my work. I'm a cybersecurity consultant. I completed a government project, and this is my bonus payment." The officer frowned, flipping through the papers the bank had sent over. "The bank says the company that issued this check doesn't usually pay bonuses this large. Are you sure this is legitimate?" "I'm sure," Danielle said firmly. "You can check with the federal agency. I have all my documents." But the officers exchanged looks, and their skepticism grew. It was as if her words alone weren't enough to convince them. They continued to question her, repeating the same questions in different ways, hoping for an answer that might slip or sound suspicious. Hours passed. Danielle remained calm. She had faced difficult situations before, but nothing like this. The feeling of being accused of something she hadn't done was frustrating. Worse was the unspoken suspicion hanging in the room, like a heavy cloud. The officers didn't just doubt the check, they doubted her, her honesty, her entire story. Meanwhile, back at the bank, the manager, Mr. Connors, was busy trying to justify what had happened. On the surface, it seemed like he was simply following the bank's rules. A large check needed verification, especially when it came from someone who didn't fit the typical client profile for such an amount. Behind closed doors, some bank employees whispered among themselves about the strange case. They talked about the unusual customer, hinting that someone like Danielle wouldn't normally have such a large sum of money. No one considered the years of hard work, the countless hours she had spent building her career. Outside the police station, the news of Danielle's arrest quietly spread. A few people noticed the story on local news websites or on social media. Some were shocked. Why would a respected professional be treated like a criminal for depositing her own money? Others, however, were not surprised. For many, the story was sadly familiar. A story of suspicion, prejudice, and misunderstanding. At the station, Danielle's lawyer was called. He arrived a few hours later, a calm and reassuring presence in the tense room. He asked Danielle for all the documents related to the check, the contract, the project. He promised to fight the accusations and get the truth out. The lawyer knew this case was bigger than just one bank or one check. It was about systemic issues, how people were judged by their appearance, not their facts, how trust was given unevenly, and how people like Danielle had to work twice as hard to prove themselves. Still, despite the lawyer's support, the officers kept their doubts. One of them remarked, "It's rare to see someone with a clean record get a check this big. We want to be sure there's no foul play." Danielle's heart sank. Her record wasn't just clean. It was exemplary. She had never broken a law or had any complaints, but her words seemed to fall on deaf ears. She sat quietly, thinking about how many times in her life she had been underestimated or treated unfairly. She remembered times at work when colleagues assumed she didn't know her job because of her skin color or gender. She remembered how many times she had to prove herself, sometimes more than others. And here she was again, fighting the same battle. Hours turned into a long, exhausting day. The officers continued their investigation, checking with the issuing company and the federal agencies. They called the bank, tried to verify the check's origin, and dug into Danielle's background. But something unexpected happened. The more they dug, the more they realized that Danielle was telling the truth. The company was real. The contract was legitimate. And Danielle was not just a consultant. She was one of the top cybersecurity experts in her field. The federal agency confirmed that the check was a legitimate payment for a project that had prevented a major cyber attack. The money was her earned bonus, a reward for her work protecting national security. Despite the confirmation, the officers still seemed reluctant to admit they were wrong. It was as if accepting the truth was harder than sticking to their suspicion. But the evidence was clear. Meanwhile, social media users had started to pick up the story. Many people expressed outrage. They shared posts condemning the bank's quick judgment and the police's treatment of Danielle. Hashtags like "La Justice for Danielle" and "Stop Racial Profiling" trended locally. Some wrote personal stories, sharing how they or their loved ones had faced similar discrimination. Others praised Danielle for her strength and professionalism in the face of injustice. The pressure mounted on the bank and the local police department. The story was no longer just about a suspicious check. It was about fairness, respect, and the need for change. Danielle's lawyer worked tirelessly to ensure that all charges would be dropped and that Danielle's name would be cleared. He also prepared to file a formal complaint against the bank for their actions. Throughout it all, Danielle remained composed. She gave interviews to reporters, sharing her experience, but always emphasizing that this was a bigger problem than just her case. She spoke about the importance of trust, equality, and the need to see people for who they truly are. "I didn't ask for special treatment," she said in one interview. "I only asked to be treated fairly, just like anyone else." Her words resonated with many. They reminded people that behind every headline was a real person, deserving of respect and dignity. As the investigation continued, Danielle's story sparked conversations in boardrooms, classrooms, and homes. It became a powerful example of how biases could affect even the most accomplished individuals. The bank issued a formal apology. They admitted that their employees had acted hastily and promised to review their policies to prevent similar incidents. They also pledged to provide diversity training to staff members. The police department released a statement expressing regret over how the situation was handled. They promised to work on improving their procedures to avoid unnecessary arrests in the future. But for Danielle, the experience left a lasting impact. It opened her eyes to how much work still needed to be done to achieve true equality. She decided to use her voice and her story to help others. She began speaking at events, mentoring young women in technology, and advocating for fair treatment in all areas of life. Her journey had been difficult, but it had also been powerful. She had faced suspicion, arrest, and public scrutiny, and come out stronger. As the days passed, Danielle prepared to return to her work, but with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her skills, her dedication, and her courage could inspire change, not just in the tech world, but in society as a whole. And though the memory of that day in the bank would never fade, she refused to let it define her. Instead, she chose to let it fuel her determination, to prove that excellence knows no color and that justice is worth fighting for. After the police station released Danielle Roberts and the bank publicly apologized, one might think her troubles were over. But for Danielle, the story was far from finished. The world around her had changed, and with that change came new challenges and new opportunities. Danielle felt a mix of relief and determination as she stepped out of the police station that day. The sunlight was warmer than before, as if the world itself was welcoming her back. Yet, inside her, something had shifted. She realized that the experience she went through wasn't just about a mistaken accusation. It was about fighting a system that often misunderstood and underestimated people like her. In the days that followed, Danielle decided she could not let the incident be forgotten. She wanted to share her story, not to seek sympathy but to spark a conversation about the way people, especially Black women, are treated in business, banking, and law enforcement. She began by writing a detailed account of her experience. She described the moment she walked into the bank with her check, the suspicious looks from the teller and the manager, the sudden arrival of the police, the hours of questioning, and the eventual arrival of the FBI agents who recognized her true value. She wrote about the anger, the frustration, and the unexpected respect she received at the end. When she shared the post on social media, it quickly went viral. People from all over the country read her story and related to it. Many shared similar experiences of being judged unfairly because of their race or gender. Some praised her courage, saying she had given a voice to many who had suffered in silence. Danielle's story caught the attention of major news outlets. Journalists reached out to interview her, wanting to know more about the incident and the larger issues it represented. Danielle spoke openly and honestly, emphasizing that her experience was just one example of a much bigger problem. She talked about systemic racism, how unconscious biases influence decisions in everyday life, from who gets hired to who gets arrested. She explained how banks sometimes apply different rules depending on a person's background, leading to unfair treatment. Her interviews were compelling. Danielle was articulate and passionate, yet calm and composed. She refused to let anger control her words. Instead, she focused on solutions, how companies and institutions could do better, how training and awareness could reduce bias, and how everyone could play a role in creating a fairer society. The more Danielle spoke, the more her voice was heard. She was invited to conferences, panel discussions, and community events. People listened to her insights on cybersecurity, but also on social justice and equality. At one event, she met a group of young women interested in technology careers. Many of them had faced similar struggles, being doubted, underestimated, or excluded. Danielle shared her journey, encouraging them to keep pushing forward despite obstacles. She emphasized the importance of self-belief, hard work, and finding allies who support you. She spoke about the power of mentorship and how lifting others up creates a stronger community. Her message inspired many. Some young women contacted her later, saying they felt motivated to pursue their dreams because of her words. Danielle felt proud and humbled. She realized that her experience, though painful, had given her a chance to make a difference. At the same time, Danielle did not forget the more personal side of her story. She continued to deal with the emotional aftermath of being accused wrongly. Sometimes she felt tired or discouraged, but she reminded herself that every step forward was worth it. Her family and close friends were her pillars of strength. They stood by her through the toughest moments, offering support and love. Her mother often told her, "You are stronger than they think and smarter than they believe." Danielle also received messages of support from unexpected places. Some colleagues at work reached out, expressing admiration and regret that she had gone through such an ordeal. Her employer, a major cybersecurity firm, publicly expressed their confidence in her and promised to support her fully. The bank, under pressure from the public and media, took further steps. They launched a review of their policies and employee training programs. The branch manager, Mr. Connors, was reassigned to a different location, and new leadership was brought in with a clear mandate to improve diversity and inclusion. Danielle felt these changes were necessary, but she knew real change would take time. She remained focused on her work, determined to prove that her skills were her strongest voice. She continued working on cybersecurity projects that mattered deeply, protecting critical infrastructure, defending against cyber attacks, and safeguarding personal data became her mission. Each successful project was a reminder that her value could not be denied. Meanwhile, the FBI agents who had intervened in her case stayed in touch. They respected her professionalism and admired her courage. They invited her to speak at training sessions for federal agents on recognizing bias and understanding the value of diverse professionals. Danielle gladly accepted, seeing it as another way to influence change from within institutions. As her story grew, Danielle realized something else important. She was not alone. Many people in her community and across the country had experienced discrimination and suspicion, but together, their voices could create a wave of awareness and progress. She began collaborating with civil rights organizations, using her platform to highlight stories like hers. They worked together to develop educational programs, policy, recommendations, and support networks. Danielle's journey from being accused of forgery to becoming a respected advocate was remarkable. It showed the power of resilience, truth, and courage. But even as she made a difference publicly, Danielle never forgot the quiet moments when she questioned herself. She knew that true healing came from embracing every part of her story, including the pain and the triumph. Her story was still unfolding. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt, but she faced them with her head held high. In the end, Danielle's experience was more than just a personal battle. It was a call to action for fairness, respect, and justice in every corner of society, and she was ready to answer that call. After Danielle Roberts had shared her story widely and the bank had apologized publicly, many people believed that the worst was behind her. But Danielle knew that the journey toward true justice and recognition was only just beginning. What happened next was a mix of new opportunities, more challenges, and a surprising turn of events that showed the power of standing firm and the importance of allies. In the weeks following the public apology, Danielle started receiving messages from people she had never met before. Some were from women who had experienced discrimination at their workplaces, some from students wanting advice on how to break into the cybersecurity field, and others were professionals in banking and law enforcement who wanted to learn from her experience. One day, Danielle received an unexpected phone call from an FBI special agent named Mark Harris. Agent Harris was part of the team that had intervened during her arrest. He explained that after reviewing the case, the FBI leadership had decided to invite Danielle to speak at their headquarters in Washington, D.C. The FBI wanted her to share her experience, not just about the wrongful accusation, but also about her career in cybersecurity and her views on how to better handle cases involving minority professionals. They believed Danielle's perspective could help train agents to recognize bias and avoid unnecessary mistakes in the future. Danielle was surprised but honored by the invitation. She accepted immediately, seeing this as a chance to make a real difference. When she arrived at the FBI headquarters, she felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The building was imposing, full of history and stories of important cases. But Danielle wasn't there as a suspect. She was there as an expert and a teacher. In the conference room, dozens of agents and officials sat ready to listen. Danielle began by telling the story of the day she went to the bank with the large check, the sudden suspicion, the arrest, and how the FBI's quick action had changed the course of events. She explained how assumptions and unconscious biases had nearly destroyed her reputation, despite her years of work protecting national security through cybersecurity. She talked about the dangers of judging people based on appearance instead of facts, especially in sensitive and important situations like law enforcement and banking. The agents asked questions. They wanted to understand more about how to spot bias, how to communicate better with people from different backgrounds, and how to treat everyone fairly and respectfully. Danielle didn't hold back. She shared her personal feelings, the frustration of being doubted, and the strength she found in standing up for herself calmly and professionally. Her speech was powerful. Many agents told her afterward that they had never heard such an honest and eye-opening account. Some admitted they hadn't thought about these issues in their work before. The FBI decided to include Danielle in a new training program focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. She became a regular speaker, helping law enforcement officers across the country to understand the importance of fairness and respect. This new role gave Danielle a sense of purpose. She realized that by sharing her story, she could help prevent others from experiencing what she had gone through. Back in her daily life, Danielle also faced other challenges. The bank's public apology had helped repair some of the damage, but some people still doubted her or whispered behind her back. She knew that prejudice didn't disappear overnight. At work, Danielle had to rebuild trust with some colleagues, who were surprised by the news or unsure how to react. She handled it with grace, focusing on her job and letting her skills speak for themselves. One day she received an email from the CEO of her company, praising her recent work and inviting her to lead an important project to protect a major client from a cyber attack. It was a clear sign that her professional reputation was strong and her abilities were respected. As Danielle took on new projects, she also used her platform to mentor others. She started a program to support young women of color interested in technology careers, offering workshops, networking opportunities, and one-on-one guidance. Many participants told her that her story gave them hope and motivation. Danielle felt grateful to be able to give back and help others navigate challenges she had faced. Meanwhile, the bank where the incident happened continued to make changes. They hired diversity consultants and began training all employees on unconscious bias and cultural sensitivity. They also set up a new system for handling large transactions that aimed to avoid unfair profiling. Danielle was invited to speak at the bank's headquarters about her experience and the importance of fair treatment. It was not easy for her to return, but she accepted the invitation, believing it was necessary for progress. Her talk was honest and moving. She shared the pain of being falsely accused, but also expressed hope that the bank's new policies would create a better future for all customers. Some employees thanked her personally, admitting they had never thought about how their actions could impact someone's life so deeply. Despite these positive developments, Danielle knew the fight against bias and discrimination was ongoing. She began working with civil rights organizations to advocate for stronger protections against racial profiling and unfair treatment. Together, they pushed for new laws and policies that would require banks and law enforcement to use fairer procedures and provide better training. Danielle's role as an advocate grew. She testified before local government committees, spoke at national conferences, and participated in community forums. Her message was always clear. Fairness is not a favor. It is a right. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their race, gender, or background. Through her advocacy, Danielle met many inspiring people, activists, lawyers, educators, who shared her passion for justice. They formed a network that worked tirelessly to make the world a better place. One of Danielle's proudest moments came when a bill she supported passed in her state legislature. The new law required banks to improve transparency and accountability in how they handle suspicious transactions, especially involving minority customers. This victory showed Danielle that change was possible when people stood together and raised their voices. At the same time, Danielle never forgot the personal side of her journey. She continued to spend time with her family and friends, finding comfort and strength in their love. She also took moments for herself, enjoying hobbies she had set aside during the stressful months, reading novels, hiking in nature, and practicing meditation. These activities helped her stay balanced and focused. Danielle's story became a beacon of hope for many. It showed that even in the face of injustice, resilience and courage can lead to meaningful change. As the years passed, Danielle's influence grew beyond her community. She was invited to speak internationally, sharing her experiences and ideas with audiences around the world. Her message crossed borders, reminding everyone that fairness and respect are universal values. Through it all, Danielle remained humble. She often said, "I am just one person, but together we can make a difference." Her words inspired countless others to stand up, speak out, and fight for their rights. Looking back, Danielle saw how far she had come. From the moment of suspicion at the bank to becoming a respected leader and advocate. Her journey was not easy, but it was powerful. It proved that strength, honesty, and determination could overcome prejudice. And it showed that when people listen and learn from each other, the world can become a better place. The journey Danielle Roberts had taken was truly remarkable. From being accused unfairly of forgery at a bank to becoming a symbol of courage, resilience, and change, her story touched many lives. But the final chapter of her experience was about something even bigger than herself. It was about how her fight sparked real transformation in society, institutions, and most importantly, in the hearts of people. After years of advocacy, speaking engagements, mentoring, and working closely with organizations, Danielle's impact was felt far beyond her local community. She had become a recognized voice on issues of racial bias, fairness, and cybersecurity. But her work also led to lasting changes in policies and culture, in banking, law enforcement, and workplaces across the country. One of the most significant moments came when Danielle was invited to Washington, D.C. to participate in a special congressional hearing. The hearing was organized to address the growing concerns about racial profiling and discrimination in financial institutions and law enforcement agencies. Danielle stood before a group of lawmakers, experts, and community leaders. Her voice was steady but full of emotion as she recounted her personal story, the humiliating experience at the bank, the wrongful arrest, and the fight to clear her name. She explained clearly and simply how racial bias often operates in hidden ways. It wasn't just about overt racism, but about assumptions people make based on a person's appearance, background, or name. These assumptions lead to unfair treatment that damages lives and undermines trust in important institutions. Danielle urged lawmakers to create stronger safeguards that would protect people from discrimination and to require better training for employees in banks and law enforcement. She emphasized the importance of listening to the voices of those who had suffered injustice. Her testimony was powerful and well received. Several lawmakers publicly praised her courage and promised to work toward meaningful reforms. Following the hearing, Danielle was invited to join a new advisory committee focused on improving fairness and transparency in banking and policing. This committee brought together community leaders, industry experts, and government officials to develop practical solutions. Danielle threw herself into this work with determination. She knew that words alone were not enough. There had to be real changes in policies and practices. Over the next months, the committee proposed new guidelines for banks to follow when handling suspicious transactions. These guidelines included clearer communication with customers, unbiased investigation procedures, and accountability measures to prevent discrimination. The committee also recommended expanded training programs for law enforcement officers on cultural sensitivity and implicit bias. They stressed the importance of building trust between communities and police. Thanks to Danielle's involvement and leadership, these recommendations gained wide support and were adopted by many banks and agencies across the country. At the same time, Danielle continued her work in cybersecurity. Her expertise remained highly sought after, and she led several successful projects protecting critical infrastructure from cyber threats. Her dual role as a cybersecurity expert and a social advocate made her unique. She inspired others to see that technical skills and social justice could go hand in hand. One of her proudest achievements was establishing a scholarship fund for young women of color pursuing careers in technology. She worked with companies, nonprofits, and educational institutions to raise funds and create opportunities. The scholarship program quickly grew, helping dozens of students every year. Many recipients shared how Danielle's story motivated them to overcome challenges and aim high. In addition to her professional and advocacy work, Danielle's personal life flourished. She maintained close relationships with her family and friends, who celebrated her successes and supported her during difficult times. She also took time to enjoy simple pleasures, traveling to new places, reading books, and spending quiet evenings at home. Through it all, Danielle remained grounded and humble. She often reminded herself and others that progress is a journey, not a destination. She encouraged people to keep speaking up, to listen with empathy, and to work together to create a fairer world. Her story became a beacon of hope for many who faced discrimination or doubt. It showed that even when systems fail, individuals can rise above and help change those systems for the better. Danielle's courage inspired new generations to believe in themselves and demand justice. Years after the incident at the bank, Danielle was invited to give a keynote speech at a major international conference on diversity and inclusion. Standing on the stage, she looked out at the audience filled with people from many countries and backgrounds. She shared her journey, its hardships and triumphs, and spoke about the universal need for fairness and respect. Her message was simple, but profound. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, and each person has the power to make a difference. The applause was long and heartfelt. Danielle felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She knew her story had touched hearts and minds around the world. Looking back, Danielle reflected on how one painful moment had changed her life forever. What started as a false accusation had led to a movement toward justice, understanding, and hope. She was proud of what she had accomplished, but remained committed to continuing her work. She believed that every small step forward counts, and that together, people can build a better future. Her legacy was not just in the policies changed or the speeches given, but in the countless lives she had inspired to stand up, speak out, and believe in a world where fairness and kindness prevail. Danielle Roberts' story teaches us that no matter the obstacles, resilience and courage can lead to meaningful change. It reminds us to question assumptions, to fight for justice, and to never underestimate the power of one person's voice. And in the end, it shows that true strength comes from standing tall, even when the world doubts you, and using your experience to light the way for others. If you want, I can help you with a summary or any other part related to the story.